This is the Stockinette Stitch for the knitting board. We're working on a CinDWoodCrafts Universal S Loom. These looms have color pegs, which are not used when you're working a double panel, which is what we're doing. Double panel is when you're working the top pegs and the corresponding bottom pegs. We've already done our cast on. Our cast on is the basic cast on for the knitting board using an anchor yarn. Now I'd like to show you how to actually do your knitting, which the stitch would be the Stockinette Stitch. Stockinette Stitch is actually worked exactly like the basic cast on. We will bring our working yarn, which is coming off. We finished our cast on for our second pass on this peg. So we will start our first row of knitting with the top peg. Skip the bottom peg and go to the next one. Skip, go to the next one. We're going to skip this one because that's part of the stitch, but then remember we skip the color pegs on the Universal S. So we're going to bring it to the next peg and bring it around the front, skip its corresponding peg, bring it around the front of the next, skip its corresponding peg and around the front of the next. So we're going to skip its corresponding peg, bring around the front of the next. Remember, skip the color pegs, then skip the corresponding peg and around the front of the next. Skip the corresponding peg around the front of the next. Skip its corresponding peg and skip the blue around the front of the next. Skip its corresponding peg around the front of the next, and the first pass is done. Like the basic cast on, the Stockinette Stitch for the double panel knitting for the knitting board has two passes. Pass 1, pass 2. Or vice versa if you work the other way around a loom. Okay. Now we're ready to work our second pass where we go back the other direction. When we go back the other direction, just as with the basic cast on, we're going to be wrapping only the pegs that we skipped. Not the blue pegs, but the corresponding pegs that we skipped. So we're going to bring our working yarn to the bottom, to the first peg without a second loop, around the front, skip its corresponding, around the front of the next, skip its corresponding and the blue peg around the front of the next, skip the corresponding, around the front of the next, skip the corresponding, around the front of the next, skip, wrap, skip the blue, and skip the corresponding peg at the bottom around the front of the next, and next, and next, and next until you get to the last peg. Now each peg, each beige or white peg should have 2 stitches or 2 loops on it. Nothing should be on the color pegs. We're going to bring the bottom loop up and over and knit off each stitch.